The metal beneath Captain Veltar's claws felt cold and unforgiving as she held tight to the command rail. Around her, the bridge of the last haven hummed with the tired sounds of a dying ship. Sparks flew from a control panel that no one had bothered to fix in weeks. What was the point? Everything was breaking down, just like the rest of their world. Captain, her second Ninjaman, Thekros approached with heavy steps. His once uniform hung loose on his thin frame. Like all of them, he was starving. We lost 17 more today to the Grey Death. Veltar closed her eyes for a moment. 17 more names to add to the endless list of the dead. 17 more families torn apart by the thing that had destroyed their civilization. How much food do we have left? 6 days, maybe 7 if we cut rations again. Thekros looked at his datapad with tired eyes. The nanites got into the growing bays on decks 7 through 12. Everything is gone. The plants, the soil, even the metal containers are being eaten away. Through the massive windows of the bridge, Veltar could see the other ships of their fleet. Once the Cathani had commanded over 1,000 vessels, each one a masterpiece of engineering that could travel between the stars with grace and power. Now, less than 100 ships remained, all of them scarred and broken. Some leaked air into space, leaving trails of frozen crystals behind them. Others had sections that glowed with the sickly gray light of the nanite plague. 50,000, Veltar whispered to herself. 50,000 Cathani left in the entire universe. Her species had once ruled 12 star systems, built cities that touched the clouds, and created art that made other species weep with joy. Now, they were nothing more than refugees running from death itself. The plague had started small, a few sick people on the outer colonies, nothing that their medicine could not handle. But this was different. The Grey Death ate everything that lived. Plants withered and turned to dust. Animals collapsed and crumbled away. Even the Cathani themselves were consumed from the inside out, their bodies betraying them as the nanites rewrote their very cells. They had tried to fight it. The best doctors and scientists from across their empire had worked day and night to find a cure. They had burned entire cities to stop its spread. They had even destroyed 3 of their own worlds, hoping to contain the horror. Nothing worked. The Grey Death followed them everywhere they went, patient and unstoppable. Other species in the galaxy had tried to help at first. The proud Zenthari had given them fuel for one desperate jump to a new system. The crystalline beings of the hegemony had shared their water purification technology, hoping it might slow the plague's advance. The Galactic Council had offered kind words and promises of aid, but when the first Zenthari ship reported nanite contamination after a supply drop, everything changed. The galaxy's sympathy turned to fear. Now, bright red quarantine beacons surrounded the Cathani fleet, warning all other ships to stay away. No one would answer their calls for help. No one would even come close enough to receive their messages. The outer colonies have gone dark, Thekros reported, his voice barely above a whisper. The last transmission from Kethmanor was 3 days ago. After that, nothing but silence. Veltar nodded. She had expected this. Kethmanor had been their last hope, a small world on the edge of their old territory, where a few thousand Cathani had tried to build a new life. If the Grey Death had reached even there, then nowhere was safe. She looked out at her dying fleet, and made a decision that felt like swallowing poison. They could not keep running forever. Their ships were falling apart, their people were starving, and the plague was winning. Every day brought new reports of contamination, new sections of their vessels being consumed by the hungry nanites. Set course for the outer rim, she ordered, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. Find us an empty system, somewhere far from any inhabited worlds. Thekros stared at her. Captain, the outer rim is beyond help. If something goes wrong out there, ... Something has already gone wrong, Veltar replied. At least out there. We can face our end with some dignity. Maybe find a quiet world where we can, where the children can see real sky one last time before. She could not finish the sentence, but Tekros understood. They all understood. This was not a retreat or a strategic withdrawal. This was a death march. Around the bridge, her crew began entering the new course, coordinates with slow, careful movements. These were the same people who had once navigated between stars with joy and wonder. Now they were plotting a route to their civilization's graveyard. The last haven began to turn, its engines coughing like an old man's lungs. One by one, the other ships in the fleet followed, their formation loose and tired. Behind them, they left the ruins of their empire and any hope of salvation as they sailed toward the empty darkness of the galaxy's edge. Veltar wondered if anyone would remember the Kethany after they were gone. Would other species tell stories of the people who had once built wonders among the stars? Or would they become just another cautionary tale about the dangers that lurked in the void? The universe, vast and uncaring, offered no answers as the last of the Kethany disappeared into the night. Captain Lee Wujin stared at the glowing screen in front of him, his coffee growing cold in his hands. The readings made no sense. The new soul had been exploring this empty corner of space for 3 weeks, mapping new star systems and looking for planets that humans might one day call home. This system was supposed to be dead, just another collection of rocks and gas floating in the dark, but the sensors were picking up something impossible. Dozens of energy signatures scattered throughout the system, and all of them were sending out distress calls. Lieutenant Park Minho Wujin called to the young officer at the communications station. "What exactly are we hearing out there?" Minho pressed his headphones tighter against his ears and frowned. "Sir, it sounds like voices, but the computer cannot understand the language. The universal translator keeps giving up and restarting. Whatever these beings are, they are not in our database. Are they responding to our signals?" "No, sir. We have been broadcasting on all frequencies for 2 hours, but there is nothing coming back. The distress calls are just getting weaker and weaker." Wujin set down his coffee and walked to the front of the bridge. Through the large windows, space looked peaceful and empty, but he knew that somewhere out there, people were dying. He had been a ship captain for 15 years, and the one rule he never broke was simple: when someone needed help, you helped them. Engineering. He spoke into his communication device. "I need the medical bay ready for emergency patients. Unknown species, unknown injuries. Prepare for anything." "Science team," he continued, "full biological safety protocols. We do not know what we are dealing with, so assume everything is dangerous until proven otherwise." Commander Kim Nari, his second in command, walked up beside him. She was a careful woman who always thought things through before acting. It was why they worked well together. "Captain," she said quietly, "we have no idea what we are flying into. The first contact rules say we should report back to Earth and wait for instructions. This could be a trap, or a disease, or something worse." Wujin looked at her with tired eyes. "Nari, the first contact rules also say that we help people in trouble. Whatever is out there, they are dying. I can hear it in their voices." He turned to address the entire bridge crew. "Set course for the largest energy signature. Battle stations, but keep weapons powered down. We are going in as rescuers, not conquerors." The new soul moved through space like a silver needle, its engines humming with quiet power as they got closer to the distress signals. The sensors began picking up more details. Ships, dozens of them, arranged in a rough formation that spoke of military discipline, even in desperation. But these were not ships like anything humans had ever built. They were long and graceful, with curves that seemed to flow like water, or at least, they had been graceful once. Now they looked like dying animals, scarred and broken and leaking life into the void. Captain Minho called out, his voice shaking slightly. I am getting clearer readings now. These ships are massive. The largest one is almost twice the size of anything in our fleet. Any signs of weapons? Some, but they are all powered down. Sir, I do not think they can fight, even if they wanted to. As the new Sol came around a small moon, the alien fleet finally came into view on the main screen. The sight made the entire bridge crew fall silent. Dozens of alien vessels drifted in space, like wounded whales. Some were venting atmosphere, in long white streams that froze instantly in the cold vacuum. Others had sections that glowed with a sickly gray light that seemed to eat at the metal around it. Several of the smaller ships were clearly dead, their hulls split open and their contents scattered. My God, whispered Dr. Choi Hijin over the communication system from the medical bay. Captain, I am reading life signs from almost every ship, but they are fading fast. Whatever is happening to these people, we do not have much time. Woojin felt his heart racing. This was bigger than a simple rescue mission. This was first contact with an alien species, and they were dying right in front of him. Minho, open. A channel on all frequencies. Maximum power. The young lieutenant nodded and began working at his station. Channel open, sir. Woojin took a deep breath and spoke into the silence of space, hoping that somewhere out there, someone would hear him and understand that help had finally arrived. This is Captain Lee Woojin of the human vessel New Sol. To any ships receiving this message, we have heard your distress calls. We do not know who you are or what has happened to you, but we are here to help. Please respond if you can. For a long moment, there was only static. Then, through the crackling of interference, came a voice speaking in a language that sounded like music mixed with wind chimes. The universal translator struggled with the alien words, but slowly, meaning began to emerge. Human ship, the voice said, heavy with exhaustion and disbelief. You came. After so long, someone finally came. Would you? Smiled for the first time in hours. Yes, we came. Now, let us figure out how to get you out of this mess. Dr. Choi Hyjin rubbed her tired eyes and looked at the microscope again. She had been studying the same tiny sample for 12 hours straight, but she could not stop. Somewhere in these microscopic machines was the answer to saving an entire species. The clean room aboard the last haven was cramped and hot. Human engineers had worked for 3 days straight to build it, using whatever materials they could find on both ships. Clear plastic walls separated the work areas, and bright white lights made everything look like a hospital operating room. Dr. Hyjin called her new partner, a Kathani scientist named Kethmel. His voice came through a speaker system, because they could not risk direct contact yet. Have you found anything new? Hyjin adjusted the microscope settings and watched the nanots move across the slide. They looked like tiny silver spiders, crawling over everything and changing whatever they touched. But there was something strange about the way they moved. These little machines are not just eating things randomly, she said, speaking slowly, so the translator could keep up. Look at this pattern. They seem to be following some kind of plan. Kethmel moved closer to his own viewing screen, where he could see what Hyjin was looking at. His people had been studying these nanites for years, watching them destroy everything they loved. But no one had ever looked at them the way this human woman was looking at them now. The Zenthari scientists told us the plague was just chaos, Kethmel said sadly. They said it was the universe's way of destroying the weak. The crystalline hegemony agreed. They said some species were meant to die out. They were wrong, said Dr. Han Jisoo from his workstation across the room. He was younger than Hyjin, but just as smart, and he had been studying the nanites' behavior for days. These machines were built for a reason. Someone designed them to do something specific. Hyjin felt her heart beating faster as she watched the nanites work. Jisoo, what if these were meant to help people? What if they were supposed to fix things, not destroy them? But they are destroying everything, Kethmel said, his voice full of pain. They killed my family, They ate my world. I know, Hyge said gently. But look at how they work. They do not just eat and move on. They study what they find first. They take it apart very carefully and then rebuild it into something else. That is not destruction. That is, reprogramming. The three scientists worked through the night, sharing ideas across the species barrier. Kethmil told them about the first outbreak, how the nanites had appeared on a terraforming project that was supposed to make dead worlds livable again. Han Jisoo showed them computer models of how the nanites spread, following patterns that looked almost like medical treatment. And Hyjin studied sample after sample, watching the tiny machines work with a precision that no random destroyer could manage. What if someone was trying to build the perfect healing system? She asked during their fourth night, without sleep. Something that could fix any injury, cure any disease, repair any damage. But something went wrong with the programming, Jisoo added, his eyes bright with understanding. Instead of healing, they started consuming, like a medicine that became poison because someone changed the recipe. Kethmel was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "My people tried to destroy the nanites for years. We used heat, cold, electricity, acid, everything we could think of. Nothing worked, because you cannot destroy something that repairs itself," Hyjin said. "But what if we do not destroy them? What if we fix them instead?" The idea was so simple and so impossible that at first, none of them wanted to say it out loud. Fix the nanites that had destroyed an entire civilization. Reprogram the Grey Death that had killed billions of people. It sounded like madness, but as they worked together, humans and Kethany sharing knowledge and ideas, the madness started to make sense. The nanites could be reprogrammed. Their basic structure was designed to accept new instructions. Someone just had to figure out how to give them the right commands. They built a carrier virus, a tiny biological machine that could slip inside the nanites and rewrite their programming. Instead of consuming living tissue to spread themselves, the nanites would consume toxins and repair damaged cells. The plague that had killed worlds would become a healing system beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. "We need a test subject," Hyjin said as they finished their work. "Someone who is infected but still strong enough to survive if this goes wrong." Captain Veltar stepped forward without hesitation. "I will do it. I have been fighting this plague for years. If I die, at least I die trying something new instead of just giving up." They injected her with their experimental cure and waited. For 3 days, Veltar lay unconscious, while the reprogrammed nanites fought the old ones inside her. Bodhi, the human and Kethany medical teams watched her vital signs, not knowing whether they were witnessing a miracle or a murder. On the 4th day, Veltar opened her eyes. But it was not just that she was alive. She looked younger, stronger, healthier than she had in decades. The nanites had not only cured her infection, but had repaired damage from years of malnutrition and stress. "The readings are impossible," Kethmel whispered as he looked at the medical scanners. "She is healthier now than she was before the plague started." Hyjin smiled for the first time in weeks. "We did it. We actually did it." Captain Li Wujin stood on the bridge of the New Soul and looked out at something that had never existed before in the history of the galaxy. Hundreds of ships moved between the stars like busy insects, carrying supplies, people, and hope to places that had been written off as dead forever. "Captain," Lieutenant Park Minho called from his station, "I have a report from Colony Fleet 7. They just finished building the refugee center on New Busan. The Kethany families are settling in faster than we expected." Wujin smiled as he thought about New Busan, a human colony world that had volunteered to take in 10,000 Kethany refugees. 6 months ago, the humans there had never seen an alien. Now they were building schools where human and Kethany children learned together. "What about the other colonies?" he asked. "New Incheon has opened 3 more housing districts," Minho reported. "New Daegu is building a joint research center. In total, we have 47 human worlds, providing homes for Cathani refugees. Commander Kim Nari walked up beside Wujin and activated a holographic display that showed the entire rescue operation. Tiny lights moved across the star map, each one representing a ship carrying hope to someone who needed it. "The numbers are incredible," Nari said. "We have moved over 2 million Cathani to safe worlds in the past 8 months. Medical teams have cured another 3 million who stayed with their fleet. The plague is almost completely gone, but the cure had been just the beginning. Once the nanites were reprogrammed, they became the most powerful healing tool anyone had ever seen. Human and Cathini scientists working together had figured out how to use them not just to cure sick people, but to bring dead worlds back to life," Captain Nari continued, pointing to a blue dot on the map. "The Cathani Homeworld Project just sent their latest report. The nanites have cleaned up 3 entire continents. The poison in the soil is gone, the water is clean, and plants are growing again." Wujin felt his chest swell with pride. The Cathani homeworld had been a gray wasteland for 20 years, so poisoned by the plague that nothing could live there. Now it was becoming green again. "Sir," Park Minho interrupted, his voice excited. "Dr. Han Jisoo is calling from the surface. He says you need to hear this." The doctor's voice crackled through the communication system. He sounded tired but amazed. "Captain, you will not believe what we found down here. The nanites are not just fixing the old plants and animals. They are creating new ones." "What do you mean, new ones?" Wujin asked. "I mean completely new species," Jisoo explained. "Plants that can grow in soil, that would kill normal crops. Animals that can breathe air, that would poison humans, or Cathani. The nanites are combining the best parts of different life forms to create something that can survive anywhere." Through the big windows of the bridge, Wujin could see transport ships flying down to the planet's surface. Each ship carried teams of humans and Cathani, working side by side. Engineers built new cities while farmers planted new crops in soil that had been dead for decades. "Captain," Park Minho called again, "we are getting a message from the Galactic Council. They want to send observers to watch the restoration project." Wujin raised an eyebrow. The Galactic Council had ignored the Cathani for years, leaving them to die in space while the plague consumed their civilization. Now that humans had fixed the problem, suddenly everyone wanted to be involved. "What about the Zenthari?" he asked. "They are offering to donate building materials for the new cities," Minho replied. "The crystalline hegemony wants to share their terraforming technology. Even the Regelian Federation is asking if they can help." Commander Nari laughed. "Funny how everyone becomes generous when they see that the impossible is just very difficult." Wujin nodded, but felt a flash of anger. Where had all these helpful species been when the Cathani were dying? Where had their generosity been when entire worlds were turning gray and lifeless? "Set up meetings with all of them," he ordered. "But make sure they understand something important. This is not about politics or making deals. This is not about who gets to claim credit or control territory. This is about people who deserve to live." "Yes, sir," Minho said. "And make sure they know that the Cathani get to decide what happens to their own worlds. We are here to help, not to take over." On the planet below, a new city was taking shape. Buildings rose from the ground using both human engineering and Cathini artistic design. Gardens bloomed where there had been poison just months before. Children played in parks, built on ground that had once been too toxic to touch. The transport ships kept coming and going, carrying supplies and people in dreams. Human doctors worked alongside Cathini healers. Human farmers shared their knowledge with Cathini botanists. Engineers from both species figured out new ways to build homes that could withstand any climate. "Captain," Nari said quietly, "do you think the other species will really help? Or are they just afraid of being left out?" Wujin watched another transport ship disappear into the planet's atmosphere, carrying a mixed crew toward their new home. "I do not know," he said, "but It does not matter. We are not doing this for them. We are doing it because it is right. Captain Veltar stood in the great hall and listened to something she had never thought she would hear again, the sound of children laughing. 5 years ago, there had been no laughter left in the universe for her people. Now, the air was full of it, bright and joyful as sunlight. The Hall of Memory had been built where the worst of the plague scars used to be. The ground beneath her feet had once been gray and poisoned, so toxic that nothing could grow there. Now flowers bloomed in every corner, and tall trees cast gentle shadows over the memorial stones that honored those who had died. "Look at them," said Park Sujin, the human woman who had become like a sister to Veltar over the past 5 years. "They do not even think it is strange." Veltar followed her gaze to where a group of children played tag among the memorial stones. Some had the tall, graceful forms of the Kethani, with their silver blue skin and large, dark eyes. Others were smaller and stockier, with the brown and pink skin tones of humans. But they played together as if they had never known a world where their species were strangers. "To them, this is normal," Veltar said, her voice carrying the warm musical tones that her people used when they were happy. It had been so long since any Kethani had reason to make such sounds that some of the older ones had forgotten how. They cannot imagine a time when humans and Kethani were not friends. Through the massive windows of the hall, both women could see the city of New Unity stretching toward the horizon. It was unlike anything that had ever been built before. Human buildings stood next to Kethani towers, their different styles blending together like a song sung by two voices in harmony. Gardens filled with plants from both worlds created pockets of green throughout the city, and canals carried clean water between districts where people from two different species worked side by side. "The nanites have done more than we ever dreamed," Sujin said, watching a transport vehicle glide silently through the air above them. "They are not just healing the sick anymore, they are changing everything." It was true. The tiny machines that had once been the Gray Death were now the foundation of a new kind of science. They could clean polluted air, turn desert into farmland, and heal injuries that would have been impossible to cure before. Human and Kethani scientists working together had found ways to use them that neither species could have discovered alone. "Captain," Veltar called, a familiar voice. Dr. Choi Hyjin walked toward them, her hair now streaked with gray, but her eyes still bright with the curiosity that had saved an entire civilization. She wore the formal robes of her new position as director of interspecies medical research, but she moved with the same quick energy she had always had. Dr. Veltar said with genuine warmth, "What brings you to the memorial today?" "Good news," Hyjin said with a smile. "The crystalline hegemony just asked us to help them with a problem they have been fighting for 300 years. That makes 12 different species who have come to us for help with things they thought were impossible to fix." Veltar felt a familiar mix of pride and sadness. Pride because her people were now part of something larger and more hopeful than anything they had built before. Sadness because it had taken the near extinction of the Kethani to teach the galaxy this lesson. "What do you tell them when they ask for help?" Veltar asked. "The same thing Captain Lee told us when we thought we were beyond saving," Hyjin replied. "There is no such thing as a hopeless situation. There are only people who give up trying to find solutions." In the distance, a new kind of ship rose from the spaceport and headed toward the stars. It bore the symbol that had become known throughout the galaxy, a human hand and a Kethani claw clasped together, surrounded by stars. These ships carried mixed crews of humans and Kethani, exploring the galaxy, not for conquest or profit, but to find others who needed help. "They will find more people like we were," Veltar said, watching the ship disappear into the blue sky. "People who think they are alone and that no one cares what happens to them. And they will learn what we learned," Sujin added. "That impossible is just a word people use when they are too tired to keep trying." Veltar walked slowly to the memorial wall, where thousands of names were carved in stone and outlined with soft light. Her parents' names were there, and her brothers, and so many friends and colleagues, who had died believing that their people were doomed. She placed her hand on the warm stone and spoke in the ancient Cathini language, words that were meant for the dead but that somehow felt like a promise to the living. "We remember you," she said softly. "We remember how you fought to keep hope alive, even when there seemed to be no reason for hope, and we want you to know that your sacrifice was not wasted." Then she switched to the common language, speaking words meant for the humans who had changed everything. "Thank you," she whispered to the memory of Captain Lee Woojin, and all the others who had refused to abandon strangers in their darkest hour. "Thank you for teaching us that even when we had nothing left, we still had tomorrow, and tomorrow is always worth fighting for." The children's laughter rang out again across the garden, carried on the wind toward the stars.